At the funeral, I'm fussing at God. I don't understand why this happened. I don't understand why he didn't send angels to protect us.
What if, for a few brief moments, the line between this world and the next disappeared? What if a child, too young to invent theology, too innocent to script a sermon, returned from death with a message that shook the adults around him to their core? This is not a work of imagination or fantasy. It is about an ordinary boy from an ordinary family who experienced something so overwhelming that it altered how people around him understood life, death, faith, and eternity. His name is Landon Whitley, and what happened to him would leave doctors stunned, parents speechless, and listeners unsettled long after the story was told. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. These stories help preserve testimonies that challenge how we see the unseen, and subscribing ensures you never miss one. Now, let's begin. In 1997, 8-year-old Landon Whitley climbed into his parents' Pontiac with no idea that his life and death were about to collide. Landon, his mother Julie, and his father Andy were driving home from church when an ambulance, returning to its station, broadsided their vehicle at an intersection. The crash was catastrophic. Metal folded inward. Glass exploded. Time seemed to freeze. Andy Whitley was killed instantly. Julie was critically injured, but alive. Landon, however, was nowhere to be seen. Rescue workers initially believed there were only 2 people in the car. The damage on the driver's side was so severe that Landon's body was hidden behind the wreckage, pinned behind his father's seat. It was only when rescuers noticed a single child's shoe that they realized someone was missing. When they finally pulled Landon from the car, he was not breathing. His heart had stopped. Emergency responders began working on Landon immediately. CPR, oxygen, desperation. Against all odds, they managed to resuscitate him. He was rushed by helicopter to Carolina's Medical Center, but the danger was far from over. That same day, Landon would die 2 more times. Each time, doctors brought him back. And each time, according to Landon, he was no longer in this world. Doctors were grimly honest with Julie. If her son survived, they warned, the brain damage would likely be severe. He might never walk, speak, or eat on his own again. He could be left with the mind of an infant. Julie, shattered by the sudden death of her husband, clung to a single prayer. "I would take that," she later said. "I would take that just to have him." At Andy's funeral, Julie sat in a fog of heartbreak and confusion. She felt abandoned, angry even, at God. She questioned everything. Why didn't God send angels? Why didn't he protect them? Why did her husband die, while her son fought for every breath? And yet, in the very same moments she questioned God, she begged him, not for answers, but for life. Landon remained in a coma. Machines breathed for him. Monitors blinked steadily. Doctors saw no progress, no improvement, no decline. Just stillness. Julie prayed every day for a sign, even the smallest movement, even the flicker of an eyelid. 2 weeks later, something happened. Landon opened his eyes. Against every medical expectation, tests revealed something astonishing. There was no brain damage, no cognitive loss, no neurological impairment. The boy who should not have survived, or should have survived profoundly broken, was mentally intact. Julie was overwhelmed with gratitude, but one painful truth still remained. She had to tell her son that his father was gone. Julie dreaded the conversation. Landon's body was bruised. His head still throbbed with pain. She didn't want to add emotional suffering to physical wounds. Gently, she asked him if he knew where his dad was. Landon answered calmly, "Yes, I know where he's at. I saw him in heaven." Julie froze. Decades later, Landon still remembers what he says he experienced during those moments when his heart stopped. He recalls seeing his father, and not only his father. He saw his dad's close friend, Olin Palmer, who had died in a car accident just weeks earlier. He saw Olin's son, Neil, who had died years before in a tragic four-wheeler accident. They stood together, Landon says, not speaking, but fully aware of one another. Communication didn't require words. It was knowing. Then came a revelation Julie was not prepared for. Landon casually mentioned that he had also seen her other children. Julie was confused. She had only one child, Landon. Or so she thought. Before Landon was born, Julie had suffered 2 miscarriages. She and Andy had never told Landon. There was no reason to. He was too young, and the pain was deeply personal. Yet Landon described seeing them. He knew they were his siblings. "I just knew," he explained. "In heaven, you know who everyone is." For Julie, this moment was chilling and deeply moving. There was no medical explanation for how Landon could know this. Landon says each time he died, the experience was different. The third time, however, stood apart. That was when he says he met Jesus. He describes it not as a long conversation, but as something more powerful, like seeing fragments of a much larger picture, a preview, a glimpse, enough to understand, but not enough to fully explain. Jesus, Landon says, told him he had to return, not because his journey was complete, but because he had a mission. According to Landon, Jesus told him to go back to earth, to live as a faithful Christian, and to tell others about him. It wasn't framed as a threat, but it was urgent. Life, Landon says, is not random. Heaven is real. Angels are real. And what people choose to do with their lives matters far more than they realize. The message was simple, but terrifying in its implications. This world is not the end. Today, Landon and Julie share their story through Grief Share, helping others who are drowning in loss and searching for hope. Julie admits that she didn't understand God's plan in 1997, but over time, she says she came to believe that angels were present, that protection existed even in tragedy. Instead of remaining trapped in anger or grief, she chose to let the story help others heal. In her book, Faith Has Its Reasons, Julie explains how God used their pain to bring unexpected blessings and renewed purpose into their lives. Landon speaks calmly when he tells his story. There is no theatrics, no drama, just certainty. "I know Jesus is real," he says. "I know there's a heaven. I know there are angels. I've seen him." He believes his life was spared for a reason, and he believes that reason is to remind people that this life, no matter how painful, is not the final chapter. You don't have to decide what to believe, but you do have to wrestle with the question this story leaves behind. What if death isn't the end? And what if the message Landon brought back wasn't meant to scare us, but to wake us up? Because if heaven is real, then eternity is closer than we think.